also thank the Porter family. JD and Quinn, your father was like a second father to me. You've been like my brother, Quinn like a sister. And having to be able to speak at Don's service today after having to speak at my father's own service yesterday, I couldn't be prouder to be here to speak on behalf of Don, and I'm going to try to keep it a little light. We always used to joke that damn Don Porter was sweater rich. If you ever went in Don's closet, which I did often when he wasn't in his bedroom, he had more sweaters than Bill Cosby. I'm not sure why Don had so many sweaters. I'm not sure why Don had so many sweaters, but the why... But the why wasn't the point. Don's sweater collection was just one of his intricacies that made Don, Don. One of the earliest memories I have of Don was him coaching third base in 1988 in San Ann Little League. He was standing on third, wearing a sweater and black leather pants. Another fond memory I have of Don was when he carried, as that's how Don said, took people places. He carried things. If he was going to take a gun to the woods, he said you might want to carry a .22. Don carried JD, my brother, and I to the Sundome to watch the USF Bulls play basketball. As I recall, we arrived late and we sat up very high in the nosebleed sections, mainly because I think Don wanted to smoke. From head to toe, Don was wearing, I'll start with the head, a beret, a sweater, and brown leather pants. And also black Italian zip-up ankle boots. Nowadays, the sight of a man dressed like that with 3 young boys might be cause for an Amber Alert. But that was Don in all his glory. His affinity for leather was what earned him the nickname Madani. I was very, very, very lucky to have Don as a friend. As a young boy, I developed a fear of being hit by baseballs when I would be batting. Mainly because I think I got hit by baseballs when I was batting. This fear of mine, though, it disturbed Don, because Don, for you see, he loved the game of baseball, and he wanted me to love it too. He didn't want me to be afraid. So I recall, I was probably 9. Don and JD, we went back in JD's room. We're sitting on the edge of JD's giant waterbed. Don put a baseball helmet on me and began to hit me in the head with a baseball bat, saying, "Does this hurt? Does this hurt?" And you know what? At that moment, I wasn't afraid of being hit with baseballs. I was afraid of Don. Now, I'm not advocating that Don's method should be adapted by the Psychiatric Foundation for teaching kids how to not be afraid of baseballs. But there was method to his madness in all things that he did. But Don, we'll hear that Don was a great man and he did great things, but at the root of it, and JD touched on this when he spoke, Don was a simple man. Now, not to be confused with being simple with being little of mind and thought, because Don was deep like the mines of Minolta. It was Don's choice to be simple. He didn't put on airs for anybody. He was often known to drive his 1992 red Nissan, which we called the Sleigh, to meetings with some of the county's power brokers, if you will, and the back of the truck would be full with a week's worth of garbage. Don didn't care about crafting an image that was inconsistent with who he was, because after all, he was Madani. Another example of Don's simplicity was always on display when our hunting party would arrive. JD, Rob, and I, perhaps Titter, somebody else, but usually that was the case, would arrive back at the house after the morning hunt. Don would be invariably out on the carport, smoking and waiting. No matter what had transpired in the woods that morning, we'd be certain Don would want to know 3 things. Who shot, how many times, and why. Once these questions were adequately answered, we would offer up the kill in a similar way that the ancient Egyptians must have offered up offerings to Ra in order to gain favor for the coming harvest. Don would ease over to the truck, because that's how Don moved. And he'd approach the tailgate, and we'd lower the tailgate in a seemingly ceremonious fashion, and we would display the morning kill. Silence would fall upon Wiregrass Ranch. Don would invariably stand with his arms crossed, a cigarette burning. He would clear his throat, perhaps a cough, scratch his head, let out a moan. And finally, after what seemed like an eternity, his lips would begin to move, and I could see the words forming. And invariably, his comment always was, no matter what was in the back of that truck, "That's a pretty neat little buck." But that was high praise from Don Porter. This solemn occasion of examining the morning kill would usually be broken up by Luana coming out and say, "Jay, I got some sweet tea on the stove, but you might want to dilute it a little bit." Because after all, the Porter's house, sweet tea is a breakfast beverage. And I'd be remiss to not mention Luana on this great day. Luana, if you knew her, outside of my mother, she's honestly the sweetest, kindest lady that I've ever known. And I see so much of her and Quinn. And you're a wonderful mother, but that's because you had a wonderful teacher, Quinn. And she loved her son always and unconditionally, just like his father. I know both Don and Luana love their children deeply. I know Don loved JD because I saw it with my own eyes. Don was hard and he pushed JD, often without congratulations. But that's how Don was. He wasn't from the trophy generation. And he didn't hug it out. But I know Don was proud of JD. He was inspired that all he's done and all that he could do, and he told me that. And he knows that JD will continue to do great things. And Don instilled this in his son at a very young age. Don's love for his son was manifested, and had making JD throw one more pitch because Don knew he could do it better. I know Don loved Quinn, not only because a father's love for a daughter is special, because his love for you is open, constant, obvious, and always. But only a truly loving father would subject himself to so many countless innings of prep, travel, collegiate softball. I often joke with Don that I'm not sure if hell exists, but if it does, it'll involve watching girls softball. Ironically, I stumbled across one time on a news break or something on the television. There's a Hall of Fame softball stadium in Oklahoma, and it's called Don Porter Stadium. And I was like, oh my God, did he do that? But it's a Don E. Porter. Don E. Porter. But I just thought that was sweet irony. But on a serious note, Don loved his children, and their well-being was constantly on his mind. He was proud of their individual accomplishments. He was proud of Quinn and her beautiful family and the loving mother that she is. When I first spoke to Don to congratulate him about his new grandson, Cooper, I asked him, how's little Cooper doing? Don crossed his arms, scratched his head, coughed, and then he said, that Cooper's a neat little baby. I'm sorry that Cooper and little LJ won't get to know Don as I have. But when the time is right, I'll be happy to share all his little peccadillos with them. Age-appropriate stories, of course. As much as an impression Don made on my life as a young man, his interest in me and his influence continued into my professional career. I was blessed to attend the University of Mississippi School of Law. And when I first told Don I was going to Oxford, Don, in his non-assuming way, said, hey, bud, I got a friend over there you should probably meet. That friend happened to be the chancellor of the school at the time, Robert Kayat, who used to be Don's catcher when he played ball at Ole Miss. Don and I met with Chancellor Kayat in his office And it was a brisk morning in North Mississippi when we did. I believe Don was dressed in a sweater. He didn't have the leather pants anymore because I think Titter has them now. And they look good, Titter. They look real good. During my years at Ole Miss, Don took the opportunity to rekindle his old relationships with his 1959 championship baseball team. In 2009, they celebrated 50-year anniversary on the campus, and that was commenced by a roundtable discussion moderated by Shepard Smith in the auditorium at the School of Journalism. Now, an interesting thing about that season was, in 1959, although they went undefeated and won the SEC, they weren't allowed to travel on to the World Series because there was a possible chance that they may play against a team with a person of color. That was the rule at the time. So they didn't get to advance to the World Series. Shepard Smith was asking them about what they thought about that, and they all thought it was pretty sorry. But Don spoke up and he said, "Shepard, let me tell you this. I didn't care if he was black, white, green, yellow, none of it. All I cared about was whether or not he could hit a curveball." I'm so thankful I had the opportunity to share those years with Don at Ole Miss. But I'll be ever thankful that Don took an interest in me, an acute interest in me. And that's how he associated with me my whole life. He treated me like an adult. He spoke to me and wanted to know what was going on with me. And he would intently listen to whatever I had to say, and I said a lot to him. Don loved me, and I got to share my life with him. As I stand here today, I can call Don a mentor, a father figure, and a friend. And at the end of the day, when it's all said and done, that Don Porter was a pretty neat guy. It's the little things that made him unique, and I'd like to share a few of those things with you right now. Don loved Little Debbie snack cakes. Don loved a scoop of ice cream on top of a sugar cone. Don loved films. I don't know if he drank it, but he always kept RC Cola outside in the fridge. Don could answer every question in Jeopardy without wearing pants. Don often wore nightshirts, and he often wore those nightshirts late into the afternoon. Don actually read Playboy for the articles. He had a semi-domesticated fox squirrel named Mr. Squeaky that he'd sit on the end of the carport and feed him peanuts while he was talking on the phone to people. Don didn't really like cats, but he had a cat named Hutch, and he was pretty neat too. And maybe it's just a coincidence, but that's how he drank his scotch. Neat. Thank you very much.